About a month and a half ago, I saw this story in the Ottawa Citizen. Caught my eye. Canadian Forces Information Operations Pandemic Campaign quashed after details revealed to top general. Information operations? Yeah, that's a nice way of saying propaganda. The Canadian Forces planned what some military insiders described as a propaganda campaign aimed at heading off civil disobedience by the public during the coronavirus pandemic. Well, it's not a question of if it's propaganda. This is the definition of propaganda, and armed forces propagating political messages to tell the population what to think and do politically. It's part of warfare, I guess, if you're occupying some other country, but obviously, and this is the main point, it's to be used against foreign enemies, not against Canadian citizens who simply disagree with Trudeau's Liberals. And this 15-page information battle plan was drafted to go to war against Canadians. Well, we've got a copy of that memo through an access to information request. You can see the entire 15-page document yourself at propagandaplan.com. Like I say, we had to file an access information request to get it. We file hundreds of those a year. We spend tens of thousands of dollars a year in fees to do that. Most of the time, we get nothing of interest in return, but sometimes we get something shocking. This is one of those times. I encourage you to see the primary document for yourself, because you'll believe your own eyes. You might not even believe me telling you about it. Go to propagandaplan.com and see for yourself. Now, in the end, the government claims that they did not approve this plan. Of course, it's hard to know with propaganda. Sometimes you can see propaganda. It's not pretending to be hidden. During the Second World War, for example, Japan had English-speaking women go on the radio to taunt American soldiers overseas, telling them that their wives and girlfriends back home were cheating on them, that the Japanese were going to massacre them, that they should just give up. Everyone knew that was propaganda. It still worked, somewhat at least. But the thing about propaganda is it's not always what they call white propaganda. There's gray propaganda, and then there's black propaganda, which hides who's doing it and what it is. And so perhaps the story in the Ottawa Citizen that the Trudeau government nixed the propaganda campaign, I mean, maybe that's a true story. Or perhaps it's a form of propaganda itself, using the Ottawa Citizen to spread propaganda that, no. The Liberals would never spy on Canadians. Pay no attention to this 15-page document that was written and reviewed by literally dozens of senior military people. No. It's dead. So if anyone ever mentions it or suspects it, you can know we nixed that idea. Just ask the Ottawa Citizen, which takes $140,000 a week from Justin Trudeau's Liberals. So you know they would never lie to you. That's the thing about engaging in deception. Once you do it, people are never quite sure if you've stopped, even if you say you have. So this entire document that describes in minute detail spying on Canadians, tracking opposition to Trudeau's government, discrediting dissident voices, making sure the national political conversation is in alignment with the Liberal narrative. Yeah, guys, they didn't mean it. The campaign of lies and tricks, it's over. They said so. And that's the truth, honest. We're not lying to you about our plan to lie to you. All right, let's go through it. It's full of jargon and acronyms and other bureaucratic BS that shows there are way too many desk jockeys and not enough real soldiers in the Canadian Armed Forces. Too many people sucking up to the politicians. So they come up with this crud. They're just sitting there coming up with kooky plans. I'll just explain three buzzwords really quickly. Operation Lentus is when the Canadian military helps with disaster relief. That's a good thing. Operation Globe is when the Canadian military helps with missions around the world, like recently helping bring home stranded Canadians from that COVID cruise ship, for example. That's a good thing. Operation Laser, now that's where it gets a bit interesting, because that was to help with the pandemic. They helped with some senior centers for a while. They helped in the far north. Okay, fair enough. Thanks, guys. But then some big liberal brain in the army thought, we need to help with Theresa Tam's propaganda. We need some Tokyo Rose action here in Canada to propagandize to our own people, because for some reason people think Justin Trudeau and Patty Hajdu, and especially Theresa Tam, are incompetent and have no clue. I mean, this is the woman Trudeau has put in charge of the pandemic.
I think the public has to know this is one of the worst case scenarios in terms of an infectious disease outbreak, in that their cooperation is sought. If there are people who are non-compliant, there are definitely laws and public health powers that can quarantine people in mandatory settings. It's potential you could track people, put bracelets on their arms, have police and other setups to ensure quarantine is undertaken.
Yeah, she needs some help, all right. She needs some propaganda help, all right. But not from the army. That's what they do to foreign countries. That's what they do in military dictatorships. We don't do that in free countries. Well, tell that to the dozens of Canadian Armed Forces staff who worked on this plan. Okay, so now that you know what some of the buzzwords mean, let me read the memo. Threat. In Operation Lentis, Operation Globe, and domestic operations overall, the information environment, i.e., can generally be characterized as uncontested. Under Operation Laser, there has been no confirmed targeted adversarial information activities that specifically seek to undermine, weaken, disrupt, or degrade GC, that's Government of Canada, response to the crisis. Okay, now that's not quite true. We all know that the Chinese dictatorship deliberately lied to Canada and the world about the virus, but let's put that aside for now. Get this is the crazy part. This is the illegal part. This is the part where Trudeau's military plans a propaganda war against the people because the people aren't obedient enough to Trudeau, Haidu, and Tam. Let me read. However, the existence of mis- or disinformation in the information environment constitutes what may be characterized as a contested information environment, where unofficial actors and sources of information have and will continue to emerge to compete with the attention, focus, and understanding of Canadians. As in, someone other than Trudeau and China's World Health Organization might have a contrary opinion. Yeah, that's called a democracy. That's called a free press. That's called getting a second opinion from a doctor. That's also called none of the military's business. Let me keep reading. Again, you can see this all for yourself at propagandaplan.com. Quote, such efforts are not currently attributable to foreign powers or any malign intent, but their adverse effects must be mitigated nonetheless. Really? Is it the military's job to correct opinions, even opinions they admit are not malign, they're just different opinions? Every soldier who worked on this should be disciplined, sent to a re-education session about civil liberties and the proper role for the military in a democracy. If they don't like it, let them go work for China's army, which is a political army. That's not Canada's army. I'll keep reading. The nature of this pandemic and the measures taken across the globe and in Canada have increased population levels of anxiety, stress, fear, and distrust. A real and perceived loss of freedom and personal agency from individual Canadians. Yeah, so they admit it, what the media won't admit. Trudeau is destroying our civil liberties and our mental health. I mean, it's sort of obvious, but get this. This disempowerment and general context of anxiety will lead to increases in irrational behavior, which may run counter to the overall response effort. Okay, what do you mean? What's irrational behavior? Teresa Tam says we may have to wear masks when we have sex. That sounds not just irrational, but deeply creepy. Is that the irrational behavior they're worried about? Or is it irrational if we choose to ignore her? Patty Haidu, the health minister, keeps praising communist China, even though we all know they lied. Is that irrational behavior? Is that for the military to decide for us, by the way? Is simply disagreeing with the Liberal government, their official narrative about this pandemic, is that a problem that the military thinks they need to fix? Yeah. Quote, the Canadian Armed Forces must support Government of Canada in mitigating this overall perspective of fear and anxiety to promote and enable a rational, fact-based response to this crisis. Whoever wrote that should be court-martialed. Do you trust them? I'm serious. The Canadian Armed Forces it absolutely has to support the government's point of view, their narrative, their perspective, and to stop people from thinking irrational. You'd be irrational to disagree with Trudeau. What does that mean? I put it to you that the government has caused the fear and anxiety. The government media has too. I saw some crank on TV this morning saying that Toronto is seeing a spike of people being admitted to intensive care. But I checked. There are a grand total of 5 people in intensive care for the virus in the entire city of Toronto. 6 million people, 40 hospitals, 5 are in intensive care. But full fire alarm panic. It's the government that's killing us now, not the virus. But the Canadian military says they must, M-U-S-T, must support the Liberal narrative and stop Canadians from having unhappy thoughts about Trudeau. I love that last part. Fact-based. I guess the military is going to tell us what facts to use and what facts not to use now. Yeah, actually, look at the next page here. Countering mis and disinformation. Imagine that. Canadians can't think for themselves. Newspaper editors, bloggers, you on Facebook, whatever. We can't think for ourselves. The military has to step in and tell us what to think. Again, that word must is there. Canadian Armed Forces must support Government of Canada, other government departments and agencies, partners and civil authorities in proactively mitigating the effects of mis and disinformation which exist in the information environment, regardless of their provenance or intent. Well, that's where you're wrong. If there was some foreign entity trying to propagandize here, I'd be interested to learn what the military had to say about it. Like, for example, I don't know, crazy idea if, say, Theresa Tam was actually an employee of the World Health Organization, even while she's Canada's chief public health officer, and she was literally getting paid and taking instructions from that China-controlled organization while purporting to give Canadians independent advice. Yeah, I'd be interested to know what the military knows about foreign interference. Oh, by the way, that's true, actually, this entire time. She has been working for the China-controlled World Health Organization. Here's her staff biography on their website. So the military must counter dissident or opposition or critical voices, regardless of intent. You can be a well-meaning doctor with a different opinion. That's called having a second opinion. But the military says you have to be countered. Say, I wonder if that's what's going on about Dr. Calvinder Kaur-Gill, the renowned doctor who's been attacked in the information environment and taken to the College of Physicians and Surgeons on ethics complaints for daring to disagree with Trudeau. Is that a Psyops? Psychological operation? Well, that's the thing. We wouldn't really know, would we? I mean, they don't tell you when they're tricking you. But look here. CIMIC, that's Civilian Military Cooperation. Psyops and other information-related capabilities will be leveraged in support. Oh, so there will be Psyops, psychological operations, on Canadians by our military in a civil situation where Trudeau has a minority government, where he's prorogued Parliament, where he's banned reporters he doesn't like from press conferences, he's doubled the national debt. Now enter the military. Imagine being the little brown-noser in the military who thinks this is the time to join the war against democracy. Maybe he thinks it's a quick way to get a fast-track promotion to general by Trudeau. You know, we know that Trudeau punishes soldiers who dare to disagree with him. He falsely accused and falsely prosecuted Vice Admiral Mark Norman for not going along with Trudeau's corrupt procurement plans. Trudeau punishes bureaucrats who disagree with him, but he rewards and promotes his errand boys. And in the case of the head of the RCMP, his errand girl, Brenda Lucki. That's him hugging her last July, right in the middle of the SNC Lavalin corruption fiasco. He knows she'll never investigate him. Trudeau loves to promote corrupt lieutenants. He fires the honest ones, like Jody Wilson-Raybould. Anyways, back to this propaganda plan. Point A, coordinate and synchronize influence activities in support of the overall information effort. Imagine thinking that's your job in Canada's Army. And look at point D. Ensure that all information dissemination activities are developed in alignment with the narratives. Hey, get with the Trudeau program. Get with the Government of Canada narrative, or the Army will get involved with you. I like this. I have to laugh at the GBA+. That's the gender-based analysis focus of Trudeau. I'm not even kidding. He forces every soldier and commander to do a gender analysis of the battlefield, of everything. I mean, the enemy is focused on killing us. Trudeau makes our soldiers have a gender chat first. You think I'm kidding. I'm not. I wish I was. It's just hilarious to see that in their propaganda plan too. But of course, these guys want the promotion so bad. They'll do his male feminist thing. Look at page 7. Report and escalate all instances of mis and disinformation directed at the Canadian Armed Forces or mis and disinformation impeding the Government of Canada or civil authorities. Hang on, isn't that what normal people not in the military just call the opposition? Isn't it the job of the opposition to oppose, to marshal their own facts and their own arguments and contradict the official government narrative? Isn't that actually their job? And isn't it the Army's job to protect that half of democracy too? Isn't the Army's job to protect the opposition as much as it is to protect the Prime Minister? Apparently not. Counteract mis and disinformation in a timely manner following extended protocols, primarily using narratives and themes. What would that mean? We'll put it together. They talk about working with government agencies, with civilians to strengthen the narrative, to proactively undermine critics who have a different point of view. What might that look like in real life? Well, I think it would look exactly 100% like this. Anti-mask protest in Montreal draws large crowd propelled by U.S. conspiracy theories. This is a CBC story. Several thousand people gathered Saturday in downtown Montreal to hear speeches from conspiracy theorists and anti-vaccine activists. Is that really who was there? 6,000 people marched to oppose a violation of civil liberties, they would say. And they were all conspiracy theorists. That's who was marching. You see what I mean by what narrative means? Let me read some more. Hare Krishnas marched alongside Christian fundamentalists and supporters of U.S. President Donald Trump. Others held signs about the 5G internet network or perceived corruption in the United Nations. You got it, eh? You get the narrative, you get working with other government agencies here. These weren't citizens opposing, these weren't civil libertarians, these weren't regular people exercising their freedom. They were kooks, they were cult members, they were crazies, and the craziest of all would be people who think the UN is corrupt. What a weird pack of lies. Imagine claiming that Donald Trump is somehow behind a grassroots protest in French-speaking Montreal. That's the actual conspiracy theory propagated by the government state broadcaster. But was that just the CBC at war with Canadians, or was that the Canadian Armed Forces leveraging a friendly government asset to build up the government's narrative and demonize critics as liars and foreign meddlers? You can't really tell, can you? Look at this on page 9 of the propaganda plan. Psyops, psychological operations, is not authorized. However, the underlying skill sets of Psyops may be leveraged in support of public affairs and other government departments and agencies, collection, planning, analysis, production, design, and dissemination. Oh, so guys, I just want to tell you, no one's allowed to do Psyops against Canadian citizens. Okay? Absolutely no Psyops. But actually you can if you just don't call it that. Just use all your Psyops training and work with other government agencies. Just don't call it Psyops. Maybe work with the CBC. On page 10, they even go through a list of what they might need to fully deploy against Canadians: print production facilities, TV projectors and screens, loudspeakers, to which I say, guys, no need. You already have the CBC and most of the newspapers on the payroll. Just use them. I assume you are? Look at all the names of all the little generals here. Look at that. All these soldiers proudly planning on how to go to information war against their own citizens. Not a shooting war, no. Just a propaganda war to undermine civil liberties in opposition to Trudeau. I mean, we wouldn't want anyone to vote irrationally now, would we? They sum it up with some charts. I'm almost through the document, but there's so much here. You really should go to propagandaplan.com to read it all for yourself. Page 11. The goal is to strengthen Canadian public's trust in official sources of information. Why? What does that mean? Says who? What's an official source of information? We can't criticize, we can't have another opinion. And at the bottom there, their job is to identify and report instances of mis- or disinformation against the Government of Canada crisis response overall. Really? That's their response. Have they been doing that? Who's on their list? Am I on their list? Are you on the? Are they skimming Facebook and Twitter? Are they doing it themselves, or just calling up their liberal friends and getting them to hand over the info from Twitter and Facebook? What are they doing in this plan? Page 12. It's worth asking because they say they'll engage in, quote, information shaping and providing capture content to give it to the ADM, the Assistant Deputy Minister. Capture content, that means spying, right? Page 13 is a harmful information response drill, including an analysis plan for fighting tweets. The military is doing battle planning against you on social media, the Canadian military. You are their enemy. They said it was regardless of source or intent. They're practicing their battle on you. Hey, I wrote a whole book on this called China Virus, how Justin Trudeau's pro-communist ideology is putting Canadians in danger. Where do you think he learned all this domestic spying from? I mean, look, they're bored bureaucrats, so they repeat themselves 3 different ways, but I'll show it to you again. They say threat includes anything that can damage perception, confidence, or credibility of the Trudeau government. They're clear. They're defending the Liberal Party of Canada and its official narrative during the pandemic. They say it over and over and over again. I think we should believe them. What is this pandemic war plan for? It's a propaganda plan. Maybe it's a propaganda plan to help lubricate things, I don't know, like this.
In relation to a Facebook post, in relation to a lockdown protest you put on for Saturday.
Yeah, and I wasn't breaking any laws by doing that.
You are actually, you are breaking all. That's why I'm arresting you in relation to
How can you arrest her?
In front of my 2 children.
Can't you just say to her, take the post down? Like, come on.
I'm happy to delete the post. This is ridiculous.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I have to give you these caution and rights. You understand?
Yeah, that's
You're
fine.
not-
Like, I'm happy to
not
delete
advised
the
to
post.
say
This is
anything.
ridiculous.
You
Like,
can
this is
say
in front of me. That's
maybe
fine.
giving evidence. You understand that?
Yeah, that's fine. But my 2 kids are here. I have an ultrasound in an hour. Like, I'm happy to
Let me
delete
finish.
the post.
You also have the right to communicate with or to communicate with a legal practitioner.
Maybe it's a propaganda plan to help lubricate things like this. Maybe it's a propaganda plan to help lubricate things like this.
It was quite peaceful until...
This bloke here is not here for any purpose of reason. Put him under arrest. But this guy here is going to be placed under arrest right now. Well, I'm under arrest.
Yeah, I'm media. I am media. I'm media. I've got my permit in my pocket. My permit is in my pocket. I'm fine.
Those were all from Australia, an ally of ours, a free country, part of the Commonwealth, a lot like us in many ways. But then a tyrant in a state called Victoria decided he wanted to go full Beijing dictator against his own people using, in that case, the police. Well, Trudeau's military has been coming up with plans, not plans to physically smash dissidents like in Australia, but plans to go to war against citizens nonetheless, to smash opposition ideas, to denormalize them. What do you think about all this? Do you believe that they have, in fact, called this off, as the Ottawa Citizen says? Or do you think that leaked story in the Ottawa Citizen, what's the word? Do you think that was a Psyop working with a civilian ally? Do you think you're being tracked? Do you doubt you're being tracked? Hey, can you help us out? We spend tens of thousands of dollars a year on access to information requests. Sometimes they come up with nothing. Sometimes they're incredible and dangerous like this one. If you can help us cover those costs, please do at propagandaplan.com. You can see the whole propaganda plan. And if it's valuable to you, you can chip in a few dollars to help us pay for our access to information work. This is Trudeau's Canada. This is your Canada. How do you feel about that? That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.